I got to at least pretend to be a little bit like Bernie. Like she's smart enough to get that, whereas Joe Biden's like, I don't think a lot of people shouldn't have health care. What do you think about that? Like, my plan still leaves 10 million uncovered. Vote for me.
Be sure to go to Joe at 030-330-3003.org/net.
Because I think that, honestly, there are probably a lot of conservatives out there who, to them, they hear that language and they just, to them, it's a stand-in in their mind for like, oh, I'm just against illegal immigration and I want strong borders, but I would never hurt anybody. But there's also going to be people who do go that step further, which is why you have to be intelligent with how you talk about it. It's like when Bill O'Reilly kept calling George Tiller the baby killer, and he did it countless times over the course of years, and then somebody murdered George Tiller. Now, I don't know if that person was, a listener to Bill O'Reilly, but the fact of the matter is that's like the standard talk on the right, like that's their go-to thing, is to say like, you're a baby killer if you support abortion. Doesn't matter how early in the process you even support it. Even if you're taking a pill, that you're murdering a baby, and that's the same thing. So yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a good thing that Ben Shapiro is like, okay, let's call it white supremacist terrorism and it's bad. That's a good thing. But yeah, you're right that there is this level of, well, do you really not understand that a lot of the things you said might influence somebody in that direction? Like, do you really not get that? Because I feel like he is smart enough to know that. Like, he is smart enough to know that a lot of the things he says are borderline and can really, push somebody in that direction. So maybe that's why he's actually coming out now and saying it in that very plain language. Because maybe he does on some level, even though he never admit it, maybe he does on some level kind of understand, like, what have I done?
Someone in the chat is asking, Kyle, do you agree that Ben Shapiro is literally nothing more than someone paid by conservative billionaires to spread propaganda?
I don't know how he gets his funding, so I won't speculate on that. But let me just say I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. But also the thing about Ben Shapiro, honestly, his motives aside, he's always been, like, in my opinion, maybe the single worst conservative commentator. And here's why. He's wrong about absolutely everything, like, even for other odious people, like, let's take Tucker Carlson, for example. Every now and then he'll like invite John Bolton on the show and be like, you're an idiot and we shouldn't have done the Iraq war, So you can go, oh, look, a point of agreement. Isn't that lovely? Or he'll say something about trade where you're like, oh, okay, good. So
but Tucker does like flirt a lot more with the whole crypto fascist thing, doesn't he? The whole like
no, of course,
thing?
Of course. But
right, but you're saying that he does say occasionally correct statements, right?
Exactly. Whereas with Ben Shapiro, you're literally not going to find a single thing he's ever said that's true. And then the other thing that makes him the worst is that he's also the most overrated by a mile and a half. This idea that he's some sort of towering intellectual and like it's just so preposterous. It's the stuff he says is like, it's not even mildly convincing to anybody who's willing to actually do the legwork and just kind of research it. I mean, like, take his stuff on tax cuts, for example. Like, this is a guy who still defends the Bush tax cuts, still defends, massive deregulation of Wall Street. Like, we know at this point that, the repeal of Glass-Steagall and the deregulation of Wall Street and the tax cuts for the rich. And this is the stuff that led to the subprime mortgage crisis and the Great Recession. But like Mr. Towering Intellectual here can't figure that out. So that's what I mean. Like, there's nothing he's right about. It's astounding. But also, you're not allowed to be considered edgy if you're like a devoutly religious person.
That's also true.
Like you could pick one. You want to be the devoutly religious dude? Okay, fine. Or you could be the I'm the cool kid's philosopher. You cannot have both.
No, that's very true. But I mean, have you seen him on college campuses? I mean, he does destroy leftists on a regular basis. I'm sure you've been privy to this.
That's literally like his whole appeal to younger people. That's it. It's like, look at me destroy a confused person on a college campus. It's like, who gives a shit? That's nothing.
Someone said,
you know how easy that is? That's nothing.
Someone said it's ironic to call Ben Shapiro towering. I was like, yeah, I guess that's
so true. Yeah.
That's a good comment.
I heard he's very self-conscious about that too.
Really? Oh, I wouldn't expect that.
That's what I heard, but I don't know. I always found that kind of weird. Like, who gives a shit if you're tall, if you're short?
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
I mean, if that's the case,
9 is like, oh, this is this is great. No, 'cause it's probably going to meet a lot of people who, whatever, significant others, and they're like, am I too tall? Is this person not going to like it? You know what I mean? So I don't know. Just who gives a shit about that stuff?
So, Ben Shapiro notwithstanding, then who of the whole ilk, whether it be like him, Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, or any of the other intellectual dark webs, you've already stated that you find Ben Shapiro to be the one who I guess is the least factual. Is that a fair statement? Fair characterization?
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
But who would you find to be the most ghoulish? Like who's doing the most damage, or is that also going to be Ben Shapiro?
Give me all the names in the intellectual dark web.
So we've got Sam Harris, we've got Jordan Peterson, we've got Eric Weinstein, we've unfortunately got Joe Rogan. he's in that
That's
photo.
Unfortunate.
Yeah,
I think he doesn't even like being among that group.
But he flirts with them so much. That's my problem, right?
No, he likes he probably likes all of them personally, mm-hmm. but I think that he understands that this is like, you guys are taking yourselves too seriously. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Especially the Weinstein guy. He's all about it. And Michael Shermer. Oh my God, yes. Michael Shermer.
Yeah, I can't forget about
Oh
Michael
God,
Shermer.
what happened to you? Oh man. I mean, that guy is like, he's the type of person to, read something on like Breitbart and then tweet it like it's true. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, he acts like, I'm a skeptic. That's my whole persona is built around skepticism.
Well, I was going to say we can't also forget Tim Pool, who I believe is on the outer rim, but he likes to flirt with being part of the IDW.
Yeah, he's still doing the I'm definitely left wing, bro.
Oh, yeah.
100% left wing.
Yeah, no.
Everything I ever talk about ever happens to be bashing the left, but I'm still left wing. Whatever you say, bro. No, in my opinion, the answer is still Ben Shapiro to that question.
Okay.
See, other people, we could walk through all of them. Like in the case of, I maybe would have answered Sam Harris, but the thing
mm-hmm.
is, I think he's lost a lot of flair recently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like Jordan Peterson kind of stepped in and stole his thunder, mm-hmm. and hilariously, this like hardcore atheist dude. You had a Christian dude who's mm-hmm. like better at sophistry, and all of a sudden he like jacked all of his fans. You know what I mean?
It's got to be a sexy voice. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, no, he's the dude. Like Jordan Peterson is to right wingers what Noam Chomsky is to left wingers, except the difference is Noam Chomsky actually is a serious intellectual.
Oh, and also Noam Chomsky is respected by other intellectuals in academia, that's whereas right. Jordan Peterson is not.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson is just a glorified self-help guru mm-hmm. with reactionary politics that he dresses up nicely.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he really is a guy who, like, he's so good at the self-help stuff and the sophistry mm-hmm. that a lot of people, when they get into him, don't even realize that they are signing on to quite a reactionary agenda in terms of politics. And mm-hmm. then every now and then he'll drop a bomb and let it slip, like in the middle of telling you, like, well, here's why you have to clean your room, and here's why you have to do this, this, and this. He'll be like, and climate change is totally bullshit. Scientists are wrong.
And women are an agent of chaos and all that other stuff.
Exactly, yeah. He's slippery too, because when you try to press him on stuff,
mm-hmm.
he like jujitsu's his way out of it. Except I think Slavoj Žižek, who I still don't know how to say his name, I think he actually did a pretty good job in the debate, and I wasn't expecting him to.
It's Slavoj Žižek, but you can just call him the raccoon monster who loves hot dogs. That's what we refer to him as.
I think that's easier to say than Slavoj Žižek.
But yeah, I mean, Peterson has that famous word salad, right? If you give him a couple minutes, he'll definitely word salad you. I think the official term for that is what? Gish galloping. When you overload someone with information, he just overloads them with meaningless words. They're really meaningless because when you actually string them together, like we've taken in a couple of our clips where we actually type out what he just said, and you realize that it's not even proper English, right? Like the syntax and the grammar is completely off.
So true. That's so true. That's hilarious that you did that. You typed it all out.
Yeah.
But have you ever noticed, this is a pivot, but I have to mention it because it's related. Trump, when you write out an answer that Trump gives, it sounds like significantly dumber. Have you noticed that?
What do you mean?
Like when Trump, like let's say Trump's giving a press conference and he's talking, the way he talks and he emotes when he talks, wraps everything up and puts it in a little bow. I'm not saying the guy's intelligent. I'm not saying he's making sense. What I'm saying is because he emotes when he talks, and because of his body language, you get what he's trying to say. Right. But if you write down what Trump says, and you don't hear him say it, but you write down what he's saying,
Yeah.
as has happened many times with different interviews,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
go, oh my God, this is the dumbest person on the planet.
I was gonna say I usually think that in both situations, but I could definitely see that. I mean, his tweets definitely a lot of the times, the ones that you know are by him, right? Because you can always tell there's more capital letters,
100%.
and yeah. I'm usually like, well, this isn't English. Something else is going on here. Well, he invents words. I mean, he's kind of like Beck in that way, right? Like Kofefi is now in the cultural lexicon.
Yeah,
other
it's
words.
funny because everybody has a Trump. Like, everybody understands the Trump way of talking now, because I can't read certain things without hearing it in a Trump voice. Like when people say now on Twitter, "You love to see it." That's all Trump.
It's true.
See it.
Yeah,
or
sad. Just the word "sad" is forever a Trump. Yeah,
with an exclamation point or all caps.
It's
like every
Trump
time I know, like I can text something to my friend Corin and do it in the Trump thing, and he will read it in the Trump voice, and that happens with everybody now. He's got his own way of talking. It's really strange.
I guess that would be a good way to pivot into the election. So, what are your thoughts on the upcoming American dumpster fire?
Yeah, I mean, if Bernie is the nominee on the Democratic side, the election's over. Why not? Why even have a general election?
You think it'll just be case closed?
100%. I think Bernie will landslide Trump. I think it'll be like embarrassing.
I mean, those maps of independent donors are very reassuring when you just see that Bernie like unilaterally gets the most donations by independents across almost all of America, with the exception being Texas, I think.
So she's a good politician in that she's smart enough to know I got to at least pretend to be a little bit like Bernie. Like she's smart enough to get that. Whereas Joe Biden's like, I don't think a lot of people shouldn't have health care. What do you think about that? Like, my plan still leaves 10 million uncovered. Vote for me.
Be sure to go to Joe at 030-330-3003.org/net.
Not a single person watched that and was like,
yeah, I know.
Nobody thought it was definitely correct. Everybody was like, he's got to have messed that up, right? Like,
but
I thought he was trying to say Joe 2020.
Yes, that is,
it wasn't.
Yeah, but see, that made me realize, like, I think he's checked out. Like, I don't know why people, whether it's Trump or Joe Biden, want to do this in their 70s and 80s. Like, this seems like a horrific job for someone in their 20s, to be so in the public eye constantly, to have to, like, basically robot your body at all times. Like, if you do one weird thing, if you scratch your eyeball in the wrong way, that clip is going viral the next day, right? And anything you say is under complete scrutiny. I mean, like, we have that to a degree, but you and me can still say weird things on the air right now. Like, I can say penis, and that little clip right there is not going to be used against me till the end of time, right? But for a politician, that's their life.
Yeah, we're in a nice little sweet spot where it's like, there's a lot of positive reaction, but you still get enough privacy where you don't feel like you're some sort of zoo animal or whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you're the president,
yeah,
there's no such thing as being normal ever again.
Yeah, exactly. For the rest of your life, you're always going to be the president or Mr. Vice, or sorry, there's not even such a thing as ex-president. It's just like, hello, Mr. President. You keep saying that, forever.
I never thought of that, but that's true. They still, if somebody saw Bill Clinton or Obama, they'd be like, Mr. President.
Yeah, exactly. And they're supposed to, and that's considered polite, right? It's never like, hey, Bill, you lose your name.
That's true. Oh God,
a president has no name.
You need to be a very specific kind of person to even consider such a thing,
to even want that,
yeah, like, and the sense I get from Bernie, at least, is that he actually doesn't want to be president, but he really wants to fix the terrible problems we have.
That's the beautiful thing. Like, and this is coming from a Canadian, by the way, but he's one of the few politicians on the whole world stage where I'm like, he seems genuine. Like, he actually seems like he genuinely means what he's talking about, right? Which is rare.
Apparently, he actually was trying, in 2016, he was trying to get Elizabeth Warren to run because he wanted somebody to represent a further left vision than Hillary Clinton. And I guess she said, no, I don't want to do it. So he begrudgingly was like, oh, all right. And then next thing you know, he like sparks this massive movement.
Yeah.
Because honestly, I mean, think about it. He's the first politician in the modern era to basically say, like, instead of going down this, like, agreeing with Reagan when Reagan says the era of big government is over, and agreeing with Bill Clinton, like, we should go back to left roots. We should go back to FDR. We should carry out that legacy of, like, FDR, Martin Luther King Jr. Like,
absolutely,
he's basically the first Democratic president in decades to say, I want to be like a Democrat.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, not to mention, he's been pushing the Overton window so perfectly left that now, like, Medicare for all it's an official Democratic policy, isn't it?
You get roasted if you're a Democratic politician and you don't support Medicare for all. Like, Twitter will take a shit on your head all day, every day.
But and I can't believe that it's taken this long. Like how like, because I've always read these
statistics. You're a Canadian, that's why you don't understand it.
What are you guys doing up there, eh? Or sorry, down there. But I've always seen these statistics that the American people as a whole are way further left than their governments on average, right? Like most Americans believe in healthcare as a human right, things like that. And like I can understand why. That just seems innate. You know, unless you're some kind of ghoulish cretin who's like, we should profit off every square inch of everything forever. Like,
yep.
And
so, go ahead.
I don't know. No, you.
Well, I was going to say what's crazy is the massive amount of propaganda that's required to try to beat that idea out of people's heads.
Right.
The idea, like the default assumption is like, well, yeah, I think healthcare is a right. Yeah. Like, what are you going to do? Who are you going to say no to?
Right.
Who are you going to make go bankrupt over it? But there's been an entire industry exists to try to beat that idea out of people's heads.
Or climate change, like convince people that it's not real.
Exact same thing. Yeah. And you got to understand something. They have a built-in advantage because in order for them to win, we just have to continue debating.
Yeah.
Like for climate change, that's why they have a built-in advantage because all they have to do, they don't have to convince you that climate change isn't real. They just have to convince you that some people think climate change isn't real. So let's keep debating it. And then as long as you're still debating, you're not doing it, you're not fixing it, and then they win. So, and they understand this. This is what they understand, and they're massively funded. And now, you know, listen, like a guy like John Delaney, his whole candidacy is built around, let me tell you what I'm not for. I'm not for Medicare for all. I'm not for free college. And I'm going to give you just a gigantic amount of bullshit to try to convince you that that's the case. And all he needs to do is make people go, well, I guess there's still a question. And that's why they're so insidious. And that's why I go after them so viciously, because he deserves it, because he's really gaslighting the country and it has horrendous effects.
Well, I mean, when you say they convince everyone that it's not, well, sorry, they convince that it's up for debate. So we're talking about them basically saying 3% of scientists are inconclusive about this, but 97% are definitely 100% this is real. You don't get that with a lot of stuff in science. There isn't a lot of different aspects of the scientific community where they agree with a 97% consensus. Like that, you know,
yeah.
I don't know what else to say about that. Like, I am shocked that it's taken this long for this to actually become, like, it isn't even something that's genuinely accepted by the Republican Party, though, right? Like, you don't have a lot of Republicans who will outright say climate change is real or we should be doing something about it. Like, that's an intrinsically Democratic thing right now, correct?
That's true. And actually, I think the picture on climate change is even stronger than that fact, because when there was a meta-analysis done about 4 or 5 years ago, which looked at all of the studies on it. And it was over 99.8% of every study that looked into climate change said it's happening and it's man-made and we need to do something about it. So even the 97% number is like a low ball, because that was just a survey of asking climate scientists their opinion. But when you go to the actual studies, it's over 99.8%. But yeah, to get back to your point about it's exclusive to the Democrats, that's true. But the sad thing is, even though it's exclusive, the belief is exclusive to the Democrats. But now, what about that next step of the concrete policy of fixing it? Yeah. Then you get down to like maybe 15% of the Democrats. So it's like, even the people who are willing to say, yeah, it's real, when you tell them like, cool, Green New Deal, right? They're like, see, what happened was about that.
As a social democrat, or are you further
I
left?
do. I more identify as a social democrat, but there's really no label that perfectly describes me, because I do have some ideas that are post-capitalist, like worker-owned co-ops is something that I definitely support. And I also support variations of direct democracy. I like the idea of, like, an idea I really wish somebody would champion is doing kind of like a direct ballot initiative, but at the federal level. So every time Americans go to vote in a election for president every 4 years, we get like 3 or 5 of the most pressing issues that we get to directly vote on, and then that becomes the law. So like, you know, for argument's sake, the next time we go vote in 2020, it could be, hey, should we legalize marijuana recreationally for the entire country? That could be one of the things.
Mhm.
Should we have $15 minimum wage around the country? Should we end the war in Iraq? Like, I think the more we can directly vote on that stuff, obviously, apart from constitutional protections, which are off the table and should be off the table, like there's a reason we have rights, you know? But outside of that, I'm a big proponent of direct democracy because that's a way to almost subvert the corruption that's in the system right now, where like
within the House and the Senate, and
everything gets determined by like
corporations.
Exactly.
Ultimately, what about
funded the politicians, and then they do their bidding.
What about kind of like the Marxist ideas that if you have systems set in place, like the inheritance of wealth, then that allows for class systems to constantly exist, as long as you generationally keep passing wealth on and keep accumulating it to the smaller and smaller percentages?
I mean, I'm in favor of a hefty estate tax for sure.
Okay.
But I'm not sure about the idea of like totally like what would it be, 100% tax on all wealth from one generation to the next?
Well, I don't know what form it would take in now, but the idea was that things like, say, property, I'd say without even having to be or to go extremely, far into like Marxist theory, right? Instead of just the abolishment of property, how about the concept of if you have landowners who have enormous, vast amounts of land and they use them for nothing, and it's just because of their accrued wealth, and yet you have homelessness as a huge problem in the U.S., some kind of system that at least tries to make that more egalitarian, right? To try and reduce the amount of unused properties, for example. Or just say a wealthy landowner has a giant apartment and it's just filled with empty suites, right? I'm not saying the state should have to come in and force people via gunpoint to put people in those homes, but I just think there is a huge problem with that, right? There's obviously something fundamentally broken as we as human beings would have that exist when there's so much wealth. There's such an abundance of wealth. Why are people at the same time homeless in such great numbers in the United States?
Well, I'm definitely in favor of housing as a human right. I mean, that's something I've spoken about before on the show, in that, and I was convinced very quickly, an article from like probably 7 years ago now, there was a study, I forget what city it was done in, but it actually saves a massive amount of money.
It does. A lot of the Nordic countries do it. Yes, it does.
Over their head.
It does, yes.
So in my opinion, I from a moral perspective, I think housing is a human right. But even if you're one of the people who's inclined to say, I care about the fiscal reality of it, okay, well then you should be even more in favor of it, because there is no counter argument. There is no reason why it would be better to have homeless people on the street. So I'm in favor of housing as a human right. I don't know. I think in terms of private property, see, this is where my more social democratic side comes in, and I'm not fully Marxist. It's like, no, I think that I don't have a problem with private property as long as it's, when you get to the point where the distribution of wealth and the distribution of land ownership, and when it's so extreme and there's giant income and wealth inequality, well then, yeah, we need to have policies to ameliorate the ills of that, and we need to make it so that it's more equal. Right. But in principle, I have nothing wrong with, I don't think there's anything wrong with private property.
Well, just for the record, by the way, Marx and Engels didn't advocate for, say, you can't have possessions. Like, you can't have property as in like your things, right? You can have all the things you want. It's more about actual property as like it's as literal property, as in that there's only there's a finite amount of that. And the problem being is that intergenerational wealth is constantly going to make a class system be put in place. As long as you have one person who inherits 1,000 apartments and one person who inherits nothing, right? That's always going to exist. It's going to be built into the system.
He's saying it's inherent to the system that you're going to have massive class issues as a result of private property existing. I think that's probably true. My only counter to that would be, I would think we can have very straightforward policies to ameliorate those problems, which is why I'm in favor of a hefty estate tax. Yeah. And you know what I mean? Like, so I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I wouldn't throw out that principle of private property ownership, but I would just regulate it heavily, where we never get to a point where, whatever, you tell me the stat, what is it, 3 people that have more wealth than the bottom half the world, something like that at this point, 3.5 billion.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't let that be the case, because then
45 individuals.
Option. Yeah, you're leaving people no option but revolution at that point. Where if people ever decided, like, if people ever actually reflected on what was going on, probably would pick up guns and storm the whatever Beverly Hills
Condos.
wherever all these rich assholes are, they'd storm there. So yeah,
all the chat's filling up with pitchforks now. Well, okay, that was great. See, I think, and we didn't go too deep into theory, but I think you are further left than a lot of the people were giving you credit for in our chat, because when I was like, Kyle Kulinski's coming on tomorrow, I'd say the overwhelming majority, probably 80%, were like, that's amazing, fuck yeah, I can't believe you're speaking to him. And then a handful of other people were like, oh, isn't he a centrist? Isn't he like a liberal? And I was like, he's definitely neither of those things. He's definitely a social democrat, or you're not familiar with his work, right? Like you should at least understand that at the base.
I mean, in defense of those people, they're probably saying relative to them. So if somebody's like a hardcore Marxist or libertarian socialist or anarchist or whatever, they look at me and go, look at this guy over here. But
look at this bourgeois
if you're looking at me
motherfucker.
Objectively, social democracy is something I love, and mixed in with a handful of post-capitalist ideas. But ultimately, in my heart of hearts, I'm in favor of massive top-down reform, but I'm not necessarily in favor of revolution. I'm not in favor of like violent revolution.
Oh no, me neither. No, but that happens to be because I'm a very non-violent person. But I've said this before on the show. I think the problem is also that people think that because workers outnumber, the bourgeois, the proletariat is in far greater numbers. I don't think they understand that the majority of those workers are not as educated as they might be in terms of what exactly is causing their problems. Like, I don't think you're going to be able tomorrow to say workers revolt. I think a lot of them would actually revolt against that revolt, because they would be like, I want to defend my job, my security, and whatever is feeding my family at the time, right?
Yeah, I agree with that, which is why, and this, again, to bring it back to Bernie, that's one of the reasons why I love Bernie so much, is because he makes everything so simple, which is something I try to do as well. I try to make it so people understand exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
We're talking about Medicare for all, free college, abolish student loan debt, living wage, right to a union.
These would all be amazing things for the United States, because it's gone so far in the opposite direction from any of that. Yeah.
And I do think, like, I am a big believer in organization. And if we can ever get to the point where we have a general strike on a variety of issues, that's ideal to me, because that's like, you're saying, okay, we have a system, the system exists. We're not going to like pick up guns and try to murder, the politicians in DC. But what you are saying is, oh, we'll grind this economy to a fucking halt if you don't do our bidding.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, a general strike to me is like the pinnacle of the proper way to fight back against our broken system.
I completely agree with you there. That's very true.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy what you just watched and now crave more nectar of the damned? Did you know that if you're watching on YouTube, you're only getting half the surfy experience? We upload all of our content commercial and censorship free to our Patreon. Due to the general demonetization of our videos, we now upload half of our original content directly to those who can help us produce this show. Want even more nectar than that? Well, come join us at twitch.tv/TheSerfsTV, where we do weekly live streams, debates, interviews, AMAs, and more. If you're an Amazon Prime member, you can help support our show 100% free by subscribing to our Twitch channel. So come join us, be merry, and know that your support is helping us do great things. Like pay rent and eat. We now worship at the altar of Miranda Marone and Sappy Rat. Do check out their SoundCloud and Discord respectively, and thank them so much for supporting the Serfs. A big thanks to our lords, Kyle C. and Ricky Pilgrim. You truly are the pillars of our organization. And also a big thank you to Josh Mickelson, Schizosaurus, Dr. Zayas, Dylan Byth, Andrea Lynn Epperly, Daniel Kahn, Angela, Barbara Sherman, Jed Lewis, Elabin Dudayev, Beck Hewitt, and Todd Lajeunesse.